What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Retro Yu-Gi-Oh video and back with another zombie format video, the format based around SJC Durham of October of 2007. Very fun format so far from what I've explored. Now, I showed off the namesake deck of the format in my last video, Zombies, but with further exploration, people have sort of figured out that that might not be the best deck in the format. And what a lot of people view as the best deck in the format is Perfect Circle Monarch. Now, if you're familiar with the next format, Perfect Circle format, you're going to be very familiar with this deck, although it is missing a couple cards from Perfect Circle format. Mainly, Light and Darkness Dragon is not in this format, so you can't play that in the deck. But the deck still does what it does best, because Perfect Circle is known for setting up like a perfect resource circle, where you just spin your opponent's card back to the top of their deck and prevent them from playing the game. That's what the deck aims to do, and it can set that sort of thing up very brutally. So I just picked a list here that actually managed to get second place at a latest zombie format tournament. Now, there haven't been too many zombie format tournaments, and the one that was held was also pretty small, so, you know, we're definitely not at the point where lists are super refined and things like that, but it had a lot of interesting things here, so I figured I'd show it off. This list is by Dump Truck, who's a frequent guest on the channel and also plays a lot of these retro formats, so I figured it got to be pretty good. Going through the card by card, we've got just a bunch of great cards here. We got Break the Magical Warrior, Card Trooper. We've got double Cyber Dragon here to get a tribute on field and also just get aggressive. We've got a DD Crow. This can be searched off of Sangan and is also very useful. It gets a lot of graveyard reliant decks. It also pairs well with Crush Card Virus if you really need it to. We've got a DD Warrior Lady to banish our opponent's stuff. We've got Demok to get back a spell and then also banish our opponent's stuff. Without Light and Darkness Dragon, this is our 2 tribute monster of choice. You don't necessarily need a 2 tribute monster in the deck, but Demok is so powerful that I think it is fine to have it here. We've got Destiny or Disc Commander to bring back off of Fearmonger, search out off of Stratos, pitch for D-Draw. A lot of different things you can do with this card, and once you get it going, you're drawing 2 cards a lot, and that's pretty good. We got Double Mally. Mally is semi-limited in this format, and I hate this card. This card is so bad when you draw multiples of it, but when you don't draw multiples of it, it's really good because you can search it off Stratos, pitch it for D-Draw, and then also get a tribute online for one of your Monarchs later on. We've got double Gravekeeper Spy here, which can run into similar issues as Mally, but at least with Gravekeeper Spy, you can set this thing as just a 2k wall. We got Moth to get back a spell. We've got Marshmallow to burn our opponent potentially, but also just serve as basically like a Spirit Reaper, a wall that, you know, we can then tribute over for a Monarch. We got triple Rise of the heart and soul of this deck. We got a Sangan here to search out a variety of pieces from our deck. We've got a Reaper to both serve as a wall and also potentially rip a card out of hand. And then we got Treeborn Frog as a recurable tribute. For these spells, we got Brain Con because we're playing a Monarch deck. We got triple D-Draw because we're playing that hero package. We've got a Gold Shark to just search out things from our deck, get them back at a later date. You could argue that maybe this card is not the most active card in this format because there isn't anything that basically triggers on activation of this. We're not playing things like Return from Dimension or Dimension Fusion to bring those things back. But I do think that in a deck like this, which is very methodical, I think that having a Gold Shark to set up for a later play can be pretty good. We've got a Heavy Storm to clear away our opponent's back row. We've got MST to clear away our opponent's back row. We've got a Pre-Mat to bring back our monsters. We've got Double Rota to search out Stratos mainly. We've got a Soul Exchange to pair with our tribute monsters. We've got a Call the Haunter to bring back our stuff. Crush Card Virus because this thing is busted, and we've got a lot of monsters that fit the bill. You know, Reaper, Sangan, Fearmonger, Disc Commander. We got a ton of different things here that Crush Card can go with. We got Mirror Force to clear away our opponent's attacking monsters. We got Double Fiend Twin Moonblast to spin things back to the top of the deck. We got a TT to blow up the board and a Dust Shoot because this thing is cracked. For the side deck, I don't necessarily agree with everything in the side deck, but I do think there are a fair amount of good things here. We got another Crow for more graveyard reliant decks. We've got a DD Survivor up against like anti-meta decks, which I will be showing off on the channel in the future. This thing can be very good. We've got a Jinzo here to shut off our opponent's traps. We've got double Legendary Jujutsu Master to spin our opponent's things back to the top of their deck. Double Mobius here to pop our opponent's back row. Autonomous Action Unit, very interesting card. Takes a card from our opponent's graveyard, but they can't DD Crow that because DD Crow specifically says in your opponent's graveyard for the target. So this is a way to get around DD Crow and still get a material on your side of the field. We got Double Knock to deal with their sets. We've got a Soul Exchange if we need to go a bit more heavy on that package. We got Double Dust Tornado if we need to hit more back row, and then we got Double Pulling the Rug. Fusion deck here is just sort of a meme, so you don't really need to consider that because we have no ways of going into it. Metamorphosis ban, Cyberstein ban, Magical Science ban, those are really the only ways that you're going into it. I mean, you could play Instant Fusion as well, but we're not playing that package in this deck. But, you know, maybe it's something that you want to play in the future. The issue with Instant Fusion, though, is that Thousand Eyed Restrict is banned, so you can't really get, like, instant value off it. It just is basically a tribute to do. But, you know, sometimes that's good enough. But that's going to do it for the deck breakdown. Let's dive into some games and see how this deck actually plays. Okay, we got our first game here against PJ Darkness, a frequent guest on the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on, and we're going to be diving into the game. And I will be honest, I don't play this one perfectly. I mean, I rarely play games perfectly on this channel, but this one I definitely make some pretty big misplays. But hopefully we'll show that even if you make those sorts of misplays, you can still manage to win based on the inherent power of this deck. Anyways, we got Gold Sharks. We're going to start off with that. We go for a Gold Shark here. And we're actually going to think about this a bit, and then we're going to banish a D-Draw. The reason we do this is we got Stratos online. We got Sangan online if the Stratos fails. So we've got a lot of ways to get a Destiny Hero from our deck to our hand. And so I figured having the D-Draw to actually pitch that hero for us here will be pretty good. So we're going to banish that, then set a Sangan, set a Crush Card Virus here, and then pass back to them. We are not going to just fire this Crush Card Virus because they want to normal summon something like a Breaker or something. Then we can actually Crush Card that. If they special summon out a Cider from hand, then we're going to Crush Card because they might have Jinzo, and so we don't want to give them the chance to summon Jinzo before we can Crush Card. So we are just going to leave it like this, though. They're just going to set 2 of their own and then pass back to us. We draw into a Heavy Storm, which is pretty decent. Unfortunately, they have a Dust Shoot here, so they are able to spin back our Stratos potentially, but instead they choose to spin back the Ryza. So that means that we still do have the Stratos online to get a Destiny Hero for the D-Draw later. So I feel pretty good about that. That's going to get shuffled back into the deck. We go for Crush Card now because I figure we can use Sangan to search out something good here and either poke in direct if the set is hit by this, or potentially get a search that can deal with the set if it's not. So we attribute a Sangan here, so we will get a search after we see what everything is, because the Sangan will trigger on a new chain. We see that they've got an Apprentice Magician set, and they do have a Ryza in hand, which we get hit here. And the other cards are Creature Swap, Magician of Faith, and Premat. Now, I forget the ruling that, if Apprentice Magician is banished, even if it's destroyed by battle, you will still get the effect. So it doesn't have to be sent to grave. I should have Warrior Lady. That was a big misplay on my part. I think what I should have actually searched here was probably DD Crow. And the reason for this is because it does shut off their premature burial. Yes, they've got Moth to bring it back, but if we DD Crow the Ryza, they don't really have any high impact targets for Premat in grave. So it basically puts them out a bit. And I think that would have been the better move to do. Instead, I go for Lady here, and I try and attack into that Apprentice Magician. So it's just a really bad play on my part, because they still do get out an effect, and they're going to get out the Crystal Seer, which will indeed get around the Crush Card Virus, because it just adds to hand. You don't draw it. So, yeah, that's going to be pretty rough for us. They draw into an Apprentice Magician there, which we will get to know off the Crush Card, but we will not get to know whatever they add off this Seer here. They're going to get to look at 2, and then pick the best one, add it to their hand, put the other on the bottom of their deck. So right now, we're in a pretty bad spot. They're going to go for the Premat here and bring back that Ryza. Again, if I had got DD Crow, this would have been a lot better for us here, but unfortunately, I did not have that. So they're going to attack in for 25 and then pass back to us. We draw into a Ryza of our own, which is pretty good. We do also now have a D-Draw that can be live. We go for Stratos here. Grab that Mally to then get the Tribute online. If you draw into another Mally, we're just going to be very sad about it, but I think it's ultimately fine. And then we're going to attack into this Crystal Seer here. And in main phase 2, since they do know about the Heavy, I'm just going to use the Heavy here to get rid of the Premat. And I figure that it's better to save the MST for when they activate the Premat the second time if they go for Faith. So I will just hold on to the MST, even though this Heavy is not really getting a ton of value. It's just a 1-for-1 trade there. I do think it ultimately is better because it's the spell and trap removal that they know about. I'm just going to set this call pass back to them. I know that they don't have a Premat in hand because it's in grave, so I don't really need to stick the MST on field yet. Unless they're playing like Book of Tayu or something to flip up their Magician of Faith. That's not really a risk. They draw into a Phoenix Wing Moonblast, and I do believe that this is the second turn on Crush Card. That could be wrong, though. But they're going to go for a Apprentice Magician here and then activate the Creature Swap. Now, we did know that they had this in hand, and that's part of why we set the call, because we can go call here, target Sangan, and give them the Sangan. It's not ideal. They still get to attack over the Apprentice Magician, but that Sangan's on their side of the field that we can hit over later for a search, and we still have our beater in the form of Stratos here. So I'm not too upset about that. They're going to grab an old Vindictive Magician, and then they're going to set 2 pass back to us, which is quite unfortunate because we would like to MST like a Phoenix Wind Blast before we bring out our Mally, because Mallying back a Mally is going to be very unfortunate for us. So we are just going to try and blind snipe and hit that Phoenix Wind Blast. If we don't hit it, then we will not use Mally, but if we do hit it, then I feel like we are relatively safe to do a Mally here. So we're going to target that back row closer to their deck. They're going to go for Phoenix Wing here, spin back the Stratos. I'm ultimately fine with that. Honestly, I could just set the Reaper or special summon out the Cider here, and then leave the Stratos on top of the deck for another search. But what I do instead is I go for banishing a Mally here, which for some reason I banished face down. I just misclicked on that to bring out the Mali here. And yes, I did mess up here as well. I should have special summoned out Sidra as well, because I had no cards on my field. So it would have been better just to special summon out Sidra in addition, but I did not do that. So, again, I'm making some major misplays here. I just summon out Ryza, spin back the old Vindictive, and then attack over Sangan, or at least attempt to. They get Mirror Force for that, so that will deal with the Ryza, but honestly, I'm pretty happy about that. I now go for the Sidra in main 2, because I know they're not drawing a way to immediately deal with Sidra, and I don't really want to take 1,000 damage when I'm already running pretty low on life, so I figure it is better just to sort of bring that out now. I'd probably bring it out next turn anyways, so there's going to set the Vindictive, switch the Sangan defense, and pass back to us. We draw TT here, which is going to be okay. We're going to attack into the Sangan, get that search off for us, and we're going to grab a Card Trooper here. Reason for this is because I do want to sort of have a little bit more defense here, so I could potentially set the Card Trooper later and get a draw off the TT, or I could just keep the Card Trooper in hand as a way to beat over the Old Vindictive, because what they could do here is they could just flip up Old Vindictive, pop the Cyber Dragon, then attack over Card Trooper if I set it. So yeah, I think I ultimately decided not to set the Card Trooper, and I think that is probably the right idea. But if they have some other way to deal with Sidra, like they draw into smashing or something, then Trooper can deal with Old Vindictive quite nicely. They're going to go for a Gold Sark here, and they're going to banish a card that they'll be able to get back in a turn or two. They're going to banish the Crutch card Virus here, and then flip up Old Vindictive, pop the Cyber Dragon, attack in for 450. They're just going to pass back to us. We draw Pre-Mat here, and we actually should be able to get in for a fair bit of damage. We go for Card Trooper milling first, just in case we mill a priority target for our Pre-Mat, and indeed we do. We mill a Dark Magician of Chaos, which is pretty great there. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to go for Pre-Mat and bring back that Demock there. We don't have the best spells engraved, funnily enough. D-Draw, we don't really have, I mean, we do have Discommander and Fearmonger, but we'd have to, like, draw into that naturally, which isn't the best. Heavy deals with our own Pre-Mat, and TT, which we don't necessarily want to use, and Gold Sark's a bit too slow at this point, so what I'm actually going to get is the MST. The reason I do this is because I figure I can set the MST here. If they top deck into a Heavy Storm and activate Heavy Storm, I still feel fine about that, because we're still getting in for a lot of damage with that Card Trooper on the following turn, even though the Demock will be gone. So I do feel like this is pretty good here for us. We can attack over the Old Vindictive and then attack directly for 19 with the Trooper. And now if they draw a back row, we can just use MST on it in their end phase and win the game just like that. So they're going to draw, and they draw into a Jinzo there, which will definitely not do it. And that'll just be the end of the game there. So very, very good stuff. So again, we messed up multiple times in that game, but we were able to just pull it out because the deck is that strong. This is just a really bad hand for us to start with. We draw double Mali, which is never something you want to see. Of course, they draw first turn Dust Shoot. We don't draw another monster. That's really good for us because then we get one of the Malis back in deck. But that is very, very unlikely. So at the very least, we've got Soul Exchange with it, so that's something we can do. But yeah, it's not looking too good. I did side in some Nox in addition to an extra copy of Soul Exchange because we are facing Apprentice Monarch, and I felt like that would be pretty good. But it seems like they might have a smokescreen side into Volcanic Monarch, which is a bit of a different style of deck. We could still go for the Soul Exchange and then, set a Mali. That's something we could do. What I'd rather do is get some value off this Stratos here, go for Stratos, search out a Discommander here, and then set the Call of the Haunted. This serves both as a bluff for them because, they might be a bit more hesitant to attack into the Stratos since we just blatantly summoned it out. And, 1900 bigger than 1800, so it's a bit awkward for us here, but the other reason why we have this is because we can use Call of the Haunted to bring it back and then get value off its effect yet again. So I feel like this is ultimately a pretty decent play. Unfortunately, they've got Breakers, so they're able to pop our Call of the Haunted there, and that's going to be pretty bad for us because they attack over the Stratos for 100 and then attack indirect for 16, and then they're just going to pass back to us. We draw Tremor Frog, which, we don't really have much to do here. It is very, very unfortunate. We're just drawing all monsters, but that can sometimes happen in this deck. We're just going to set the Treeborn, try and set up for a following turn. But unfortunately, our opponent does have the Ryza to spin back that Treeborn. So even decks that are not Perfect Circle Monarch, if they're playing Monarchs, they're getting a spin there. I think we still had to do that. There's no world in which we just don't do anything that turn. It was either set Treeborn or go Soul Exchange, get rid of like Rocket and set Mali, but that is a lot worse in my opinion because we want to get the Treeborn rotation. And if they do have a Ryza, they still Ryza back the Mali either way. So like we're still in a bad spot no matter what if they get Ryza. So just unfortunate that they did have that. Now I feel like we do indeed have to go for the Soul Exchange, target the Ryza just to clear it out of the way, and then set this Mali here because it's all we really have to do. our opponent's going to think about this a bit, go for the Blade Accelerator. I really don't think they need to do this because if we're Tribute setting in this deck, then it very, very likely is just going to be a Mally. Like, maybe we set a like Cyber Dragon or something, but that's just losing the Cyber Dragon to the Rocket. So yeah, it just doesn't really make sense in my opinion to Blade Accelerator this, but they are going to go for that indeed and get rid of the Mally there. Maybe they just don't have another monster in hand. In that case, it does make some sense to do this because you know, you're just going to be attacking into a set either way, so your battle phase is going to be gone. Actually, let's check their hand. Yeah, they didn't really have another monster here that they could have brought out to, you know, get super aggressive. I mean, there are arguments for just bringing out the Apprentice Magician. That's something you could do. Actually, you could just, with this hand, they could have gone Apprentice Magician and then creature swapped. Well, that doesn't kill us. What they could have done actually to kill us here, potentially, if you have the read that it's Mally, is you go summon Apprentice Magician, attack into the set. It's flipped up as Mally. You go Econ to take control of the Mally and then attack it for 19. But yeah, that doesn't even kill us there too. It just drops down to 100. So, you know, or I guess actually you can kill here by summoning Apprentice Magician, creature swapping, and then Econ tributing the set, take control of Apprentice Magician, and that's 2,300. So they actually did have a lethal line there. I think through everything, but yeah, I mean, I get why they went for the Blade Accelerator here instead, but they did have that lethal line, which is kind of interesting to see. Always good to sort of look back on replays and see if there are things that you could have done differently or replayed lines that you could have potentially won with. But yeah, it's kind of like a dual puzzle in that way. Either way here, we're kind of cooked. They got Crush card active as well, so any Monarch we draw is just going to go to grave, and that's going to be a bit rough for us. The only saving grace is we just got to hope they don't really have any good monsters here, and indeed they do not. They just have a shell here, which they're going to swap to us, and then attack over to deal 18, and they can search out another shell with that shell in grave to have a way to pop one of our monsters, but it's just really not looking good for us because they know our entire hand off the Crush card, so whatever we set, they can sort of play around. They're going to DD Crow the Mally, which I also don't think they need to do because they knew about the other Mally in hand, but, you know, I think we're just cooked here either way, so it doesn't really matter. No matter what we do, we can't summon out Sangan attack over our own Treeborn Frog because then we lose. We can't do anything like that because we are at 200 life points. So we set a Magician of Faith here, pass back to them, just hope that something happens here. If they use Blade Accelerator, they can't attack, so we survive. And if they don't use Blade Accelerator, maybe we get to live another turn by grabbing a spell that can potentially do something here. But it is very, very unlikely that we're going to win this one. They're just going to bring out a shell, flip up that frog, attack over with the rocket, and that is just going to be the end of the game. Exactly. So, yeah, that was a pretty rough one for us. I think maybe we could have played it a bit differently with, like, what we searched out with Rhoda. Maybe we shouldn't have gone for Stratos and gone for, like, DD Warley just to banish the rocket instead. But, like, that didn't really play well with our call. So, I don't really know exactly what the move was there. But maybe it was to set the call after we had Disc Commander in rotation, but I don't think, given their plays on the following turn, Disc Commander ever would have hit rotation. So, yeah, we were just kind of cooked there either way. This hand is a little bit better. We have back row, but this time we have too much back row. You know, last game we had too little. This game we had too much. We just got to hope we draw better cards here. We're just going to set a Warrior Lady, set a Mirror Force, pass back to them, and see what they do. They are going to go for Gold Sark here and banish a rocket. So it seems like they're still on the volcanic stuff, and they're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw into Faith, which is okay. We flip up a Warrior Lady here and attack into the set. If it's like Old Vindictive, that's a bit unfortunate for us because we use the Warrior Lady, but we do a Call of Hunter, bring back if we so wish. The reason we didn't set Phoenix Wing, by the way, last turn was because we don't really have any good pitches for it. We want to save that for when we actually have a good discard. Because otherwise we're just losing a bit of value there for tempo, which can be good in some circumstances, but we don't really have the hand to make those circumstances work. So we attack in to the Vindictive, and we are just going to let that Warrior Lady go to grave because now we've got pre-mat and call targets if we so wish. And then we're just going to set a Faith and then set a Phoenix Wing here. So the reason I now set the Phoenix Wing is because now if we pitch a spell, then our Faith is online. So I figure it maybe is something that we want to do. I don't know. It's kind of desperate because we don't have any good spells to get back with Faith. So maybe I should have just not done anything here. But then if they do have a way to get into Ryza, they can still spin back the Mirror Force. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really think there's a super good option here. They've got Blade Accelerator though, so they're just going to pop our Faith. And I'm ultimately okay with that. I could have potentially spun back the Blade Accelerator with the Phoenix Wing, and then they wouldn't have actually been able to pitch here because that does not pitch for cost. It happens afterwards. So they wouldn't have been able to get the shell effect online, but I decided ultimately it was fine. They can use up the shells, and, you know, hopefully they use up enough shells that, like, we actually are able to sort of shut off the Blade Accelerator eventually. They're just going to set one pass back to us. We draw into a Ryza here, which is pretty good because we can go Solex on the set for a Ryza and then spin back the Blade Accelerator. And that's just another shell. I mean, we are perfectly happy to see that shell gone. I think generally you don't necessarily want to set the shells. The fact that they did means that they probably have a Monarch in hand, because I don't see why you'd potentially value that being on board as opposed to in hand. Yeah, they did indeed have the Ryza, so it looks like that's why they did it. They also had another shell in hand too, so it seems like they were like, well, I can't get the search off this shell, so I might as well set it. And I think that does make some sense. They're going to add the rocket to hand and then go for Blaze and pitch this shell. Now, again, we could have Phoenix swung that, but I don't really think that that's good, because then the Blade Accelerator comes next turn and blows up the Ryza anyways. So I think it's fine just letting the Ryza die. We've got pre-mat, we've got call. We got many ways to bring it back if we want to get more aggressive here. They're just going to pass back to us. We draw Trap Dust Shoot, which is very good with them at 3 cards in hand. And now we're going to pre-mat back that Ryza. That will indeed go through. And now we can attack in for 2,400 here, which, you know, is pretty big damage, all things considered. We're going to set this Dust Shoot, pass back to them, go for the Dust Shoot, see what they've got. See, they've got a Ryza, a Rocket, an enemy controller, and a pre-mat. I think what we want to do there is take the Ryza out, because Ryza is a bit more annoying for us. You know, Rocket can't get the values. It's a 1,900 guy, and we are perfectly fine with that 1,900 guy just being in the picture. So we're going to spin back that Ryza and leave them with a Volcanic Rocket, an enemy controller, and a pre-mat. I feel pretty good about that hand. I feel like we can probably beat that. They're going to attack in with the Rocket here. Now, they're going to econ after attack declaration no matter what. So no matter what, we're losing this Ryza. But I might as well get them to lose the Rocket as well. So we're going to go for Mirror Force here. So now they can chain the econ, tribute the Rocket, and then take control of our Ryza. So that way the Ryza is destroyed, which they will indeed do. So either way, we're losing our Ryza, but this way they also lose their Rocket. So I'm pretty happy with that, all things considered. You could also make the argument that I should have sold Mirror Force for later. But I feel like in this low resource situation where I do have a call up on my opponent, I feel like it is better just to clear the Rocket and just clear as many resources as possible that I can. We draw into Mali, which is actually really good here because we've got Phoenix Blade or Phoenix Wing Wind Blast online. We could have actually Phoenix Wind Blasted the Blade Accelerator and then banished for Mali. Just brought that thing out and attacked in. But I didn't really want to do that right now because they still do have their pre-mat online to bring back the Rocket. So, like, it does get them value there. So I'm not going to do that here. They go for a Sangan here to attack in for 1,000. And since I'm going to Phoenix Wind Blast that Sangan most likely anyways, I'm just going to use the Phoenix Wind Blast on the Sangan, spin that back to the top of the deck. And then that should actually be enough to win here because I draw a Sangan of my own, so we can actually drop our opponent down to a very low amount of life. We banish for a Mali, and then we are going to call back the Ryza in the battle phase here. This is 1,800 plus 2,400, so this drops them down to 900 life points total. They can still use pre-mat, but that gets them down to 100 life points total. We know the last card in hand that they're drawing is Sangan, so anything that they pre-mat back is just going to kill them here, and so we just guaranteed win the game basically because we know if they set a card, it's Sangan, so we can just attack over it in a way that wins us the game. So yeah, that's how Perfect Circle Monarch attempts to win the game. They try and set up the top of the deck so that way they force their opponent to checkmate positions, and that's what happened here. So my opponent thinks a bit about it, and yeah, and then just admits defeat. So that is going to be the end of the game, and that's why this deck is so powerful because, you know, honestly, like, I will say we were in some pretty bad spots over the course of these games. I didn't play these perfectly, but there are just so many, like, good draws that you can get in this deck to basically turn it on and just completely steamroll over your opponent here. So I think this deck is very good, and we actually got one more match with it, so let's dive into that one now. Okay, we got our second game here against the World of Dark Arm God. If you're interested on the channel, always a pleasure to have them on, and we're going to be diving in to this match here. Now, if you like these sort of gameplay, replays, and analysis, definitely subscribe to the channel so that way you can see more of them. But, so World of Dark Arm God is just going to set 3 and then pass back to us. They've got a Death Shoot here, so that makes sense why they set 3, and they're going to spin back that Ryza. I still think it is probably good value to Heavy Storm here. Just to take away 2 of them. They do have a Jar of Greed, so they get 1 draw off that, but we do hit a Saku, so that's something. Maybe actually what I should have done is I should have just not done that, saved the heavy for later, And then, when I was making an aggressive push, use the heavy. But this was a bit of like deck knowledge and player knowledge. Like I know this World of Dark God plays Winged Rhynos decks, which try and build up to accumulated fortune chains, and they can't build up to an accumulated fortune chain if they just got 2 back row there. So I figured I'd heavy while they just had 2, but maybe that was a bit of a mistake because I do know that they play a lot of back row in their deck. So, I'm just going to Gold Sark here, search out a Rhoda because I feel like Rhoda for Stratos later on is pretty good. And if we draw into Stratos, we can Rhoda for Warriorly, which also is not bad, or just Rhoda into Disc Commander if we need that as well. And then we're going to set this Gravekeeper Spy, pass back to them. They know that the last spell trap in hand is MST, so no need to commit the MST and just tell them, hey, this is an MST. And I'm especially glad we didn't do that because they've got a Breaker there. So Breaker would have been able to pop that MST, which would have been a bit rough for us. We draw into a Stratos, but we're actually not going to use that yet. One, because it gives them less information, when we get back the Rhoda, because they probably still think that we're going to Rhoda for Stratos here. And 2, because this way we can actually get a bit more aggressive and crash into their Breaker. We bring out 1 Spy in defense just to sort of form a defensive wall here. I think in hindsight, this was probably a mistake because, even if it is in defense, all the things that they would be able to do to get 2 monsters on board to clear both of our spies here would require them to have basically a monster with above 2,000 attack on field, right? So, like, for instance, Cyber Dragon, right? If they special summon a Cyber Dragon, they can hit over Spy. If they have a recruiter like Pyramid Turtle, which can crash into a Spy and then bring out a big monster from deck, they can get over Spy as well. So it really doesn't matter that I put this Spy in defense. So that was a misplay on my part. I should have just brought it out in attack if I was committing to this play. There's also the argument for maybe this play not being the best, right? Because maybe I should have just held on to the Breaker to pop one on their back row. But, given that they play so many chainables, I think Breaker is actually a bit worse in this matchup. They've got the Snipe Hunter here, so I actually do get rewarded for putting this Spy in defense, I think. Although you could argue that, like, either way, I'd still have a Spy in attack mode here if they fail to pop one of my spies in defense, right? So, I think probably, again, in hindsight, it was a mistake to put the Spy in defense here, but I don't know. It works out for us well this game overall, I think, but it's always good to be thinking like, okay, well, even though the game worked out for us, what can I do better in the future? And I think that was definitely one thing that I'll keep in mind for the future. Anyways, we go for a Stratos here for Mally because we drew into the Warrior Lady as well, so we are using Rhoda on either Fearmonger or Disc Commander. So unfortunately, the Rhoda turned out to be a kind of bad Sark for us, but I think it was still ultimately fine because we do get some flexibility with it here in terms of what we get to search out. And it is deck thinning, so that draws us into things we might want to see in general. But they're going to summon a Winged Rhynos with 1 back row here, so we are MSTing that back row just to get it out of the way, so that way we can potentially clear that Rhynos. It was a Book of Moon. We're perfectly fine with that. And we can just summon out this Warrior Lady, crash our Stratos into their Rhynos, and then attack direct for 15. We get Call the Haunter, bring back the Stratos, which is very, very good for us because then we get a search off that. So a search or a pop, actually, because we could decide to do that instead if we Rhoda for like Disc Commander or Fearmonger, and then we call back these Stratos. But we can actually get around that in other ways by going for D-Draw here, pitching the Mally. And now we can actually go banish Mally, bring another Mally, and then call back the Stratos to pop their back row if we so wish. But I decided to play it a bit slower than that and decided just to attack in with the Warrior Lady here and then potentially bring back the Stratos in battle phase. But unfortunately, we get majorly punished for that by a Morphing Jar here. So that's going to discard our entire hand and draw us 5 new ones, including these 2 hero monsters. So that is rough. We do have another D-Draw, though, so we can at least use them for that. We didn't draw into the other Mally, so that is also nice. But it does disincentivize us for bringing out the Stratos because that Stratos will get no value at this point. So what we're going to do here, we're going to banish this Mally, and now we're going to go for D-Draw Pitch Disc Commander, draw 2, and we could potentially go for call on the Disc Commander to draw 2 again. That might be a move, but instead we're just going to pass back to them, and I think that is probably wise. They're just going to set 3 more and pass back to us, and now we're in a bit of a rough spot, I think, because we got to decide how to deal with this back row. We do have a lot of different options if we so wish. We can go for Disc Commander to draw more cards here, which might be a move. But this Rhoda is very dead for us because we don't have any more warriors left in deck that we can search out with it. I ultimately do decide to go for a Ryza here just to spin back one of their back row, prevent them from drawing actual good stuff later on and potentially get in for some damage. Unfortunately, we hit the TT with the Ryza, so it's going to get rid of both of our cards there. We go for Premat on the Disc Commander, and it looks like that will be fine. So now we get to draw 2 more cards here, which is pretty good. We draw into Card Trooper and D-Mock. Okay, D-Mock actually gives us a bit more options. What I was initially planning on doing was going call for Stratos to pop one on the back row here. But now that Demok's in play, I kind of want to save the calls to set up for a Demok play, because if I can get back heavy, then that's going to be really, really good at dealing with their back row here. So what I do instead is I just go for Disc Commander, poke in for 300. And then I set the Rhoda because it's just a pure bluff. This thing is dead for us, so might as well just set it there and then pass back to them. They're going to go for a Winged Rhynos here and attack over our Disc Commander. That's fine. We sort of expected this thing to be run over. And then they're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw Mirror Force here, which is pretty good. We go for Call, target the Disc Commander to draw 2 more here. And we will indeed draw 2 more. We draw into a Ryza and a Phoenix Wing. And so we're just going to tribute for that Ryza. Unfortunately, we can't get like a BrainCon or something that would be able to set up the Demok here. So we will go for Ryza. And, you know, before we actually target something, which we do have to do, our opponent just flipped up bottomless and then activated Rhynos. So this is something that if you're on Dueling Book, please do not do this. Please wait to see what your opponent does before doing this, because I might have potentially targeted the Rhynos here with the Ryza. It's not the most likely thing in the world, but I might have done that. I might have also targeted the bottomless with the Ryza. Again, I probably would have targeted the new back row here, but, you know, I might have done it, right? And so that's something that you should, like, let me do if you know, you're waiting on a response from me, right? So, and instead I actually hit a back row that they can't chain apparently there. And so it works out pretty well for us, because we do get them sort of draw locked for a turn. I mean, it's not the best for us because we still don't necessarily have a way to win the game from this position, but we can at least set some back row here, pass back to them. I'm not afraid of their potential heavies. And yeah, they're just going to attack in for 18 with the Rhynos here. And set 2 more, pass back to us. We draw into a Magician of Faith, which is actually another way to get back into a heavy, so that's pretty good. But we're going to set a Fearmonger because we want to turn the Disc Commander online. That also gets us a material on field to potentially tribute for another Ryza. So they're going to go for a red Gadget here, revealing that they're on Gadget Rhynos, which is a variation that they've played in the past here. They're going to attack into our Fearmonger, and I could have potentially Mirror Forced this, but then they just would have bounced back the Rhynos, and the Fearmonger wouldn't have died by battle. And I don't necessarily want that. I do want the draw. So I will just let this go through and then take the 1800 here. There's no ring in this format, so they can't ring destruction their Rhynos to end the game. So I'm ultimately fine with this. But we will be able to bring back the Disc Commander off the Fearmonger and then draw 2 more. We actually are getting relatively close to deck out, so we do have to play that a bit carefully here. We're going to go for BrainCon, and we're going to think on target, because if we target the Rhynos, they do have a chainable back row, then they'll bounce back to hand, which we don't necessarily want. But instead of letting us target a thing, again, they activate Lacy Yatagarasu right away and activate the Rhynos again right away, even after I typed in chat, think on target here. So, you know, like, again, let your opponent potentially mess up, so that way you can potentially capitalize off that. Because as is, now we can potentially, you know, make a pretty big play happen here. We attack him with Red Gadget, and then we're going to tribute both those cards for a Dark Magician of Chaos here. And we're going to add back that Heavy Storm to blow up the entire back row. We don't necessarily need to activate this yet because we already attacked this turn. And I feel like the Heavy Storm is going to be pretty good for us here. They're going to set 1 and then activate a BrainCon to take control of our Demok here. We are perfectly fine with that because we can use this Phoenix Wind Blast to reset the Demok. Actually, I think it might still be banished. Yeah, it would be banished here. So this was actually a misplay on my part. It would not go back to the top of the deck. It would be banished instead. So, you know, that maybe would have changed things here a bit. But in hindsight, it really wouldn't have, because we still have this Heavy Storm. We just would have used Mirror Force there probably instead, and then done Phoenix Wing to spin a card back to the top of the deck and do stuff like that. So I think ultimately it still works out for us here. We're going to go for heavy, blow up everything. They go for Reckless Greed, and they also chain a Rhynos and then activate Accumulated Fortune. So they're drawing 4 cards here in total. So that's going to be a bit rough for us. But, you know, we still do get to attack in here potentially for some big damage. I also could have special summoned out the Cyber Dragon here first and, you know, then done stuff with it. But, yeah, I think it's also fine just to set the Reaper here to wall off a bit. But they don't draw for the Reckless Greed. They're going to set 2, then summon a Green Gadget here to search out a card. Maybe I should have set Magician of Faith here, honestly, because then I get back a heavy again. And also then my Cyber Dragon's most likely online. So I think this actually was probably a mistake setting the Spirit Reaper instead. And also, you know, this thing loses... It's just gone if they've got another Shrink, which they do have 2 of here. So, yeah, it's a bit annoying. So, yeah, I think I probably should not have set the Spirit Reaper. I should have just set the Faith. But again, you know, as I mentioned before, even if you don't play perfectly with this deck, you can very much win the game with very little. So we go for a Soul Exchange here, tributing over that Gadget for a Ryza to spin something back to the top of the deck. And then we're going to set a Crush card here because Crush card paired with the Reaper, and we can actually rip apart their hand a bit here. So they're just going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw a Dust Shoot, which is pretty good when they've got 4 cards in hand. And now I feel a bit more confident just, attacking into that set and setting the Dust Shoot, setting the Faith, passing back, and let's see what they do. We're just going to go for Dust Shoot here, just get a peek of that hand, so maybe we want to use the Crush card preemptively here. We see that they've got a Rhynos, Ryza, Rhynos, Gadget, and MST. That's perfect for us because we can actually clear the entire thing with Crush card Virus, so that is very, very nice here. We spin back the yellow, and they're going to go for MST on our back row. It's Crush card, so we can use the Spirit Reaper to get rid of their entire hand here, send it all to grave. And then we're just winning this game 9 ways to Sunday on the following turn. They're going to go for Jar there, draw a card. We do get to see it with the Crush card. See they've got yellow, and they're just going to set that pass back to us. And now we do indeed win the game. We actually can win it in a couple different ways. We go for Moth here. And the way we do it is we add back the pre-mat to then be able to summon out the Democ and win that way. But we could also just go for pre-mat here and win that way, given that we know what the set is. We know it's Yellow Gadget, so we can just get back like DD Warrior Lady, attack over that, and then get in for 27. So we did not need the Democ. So luckily, the error in gameplay did not actually matter in the end here. It actually probably hurt us more than it helped us. But yeah, we're just going to go for the Disc Commander there just to style on our opponent a bit and then win the game this way. But either way, we would have been able to win this one, even if we did not have the Democ back in rotation. So we're going in to the next game here. And I do bring in some side deck tech. I bring in like Jinzo, for instance. I bring in the legendary Jiu-Jitsu Masters because it's very good against the Gadget stuff. And also if they attack into it with the Rhynos, that gets spun back as well. So I feel like there isn't really much in their deck that can get over a Master besides the Ryza. So they're going to go for Green Gadget, search out Red Gadget here, and I'm ultimately fine with that. We draw Destiny Draw, which is pretty good. We can go for Cyber Dragon here just to try and beat over the green, and that is indeed what we're going to do. No need to commit the Warrior Lady into potential Mirror Force, especially when we want to probably set the Master here in main phase 2. So we're just going to attack over the green, set the Jiu-Jitsu Master, and then go for Gold Sark is the last thing that we're doing. We're going to search out a Jinzo because Jinzo does hose their deck quite a bit. So I figured it's good to search that out. We've got BrainCon as well to set it up if they somehow manage to clear our field. But I'm feeling very good about this. They're going to think about this and then go for a Snipe Hunter here, pitch a red, and target our Cyber Dragon. And unfortunately, this will indeed go through. Our opponents did not miss with the Snipe Hunters. They're going to flip up a Dim Fizz here and then attack into our set. Luckily, the Jiu-Jitsu Master will spin back that Snipe Hunter. So, it does draw lock them for a turn. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw a Crush card here, which might be good if we draw a way to actually trigger it. But we're going to attack in with the Warrior Lady for 15, pass back to them. I feel like this is pretty good either way because they can just clear the Warrior Lady by attacking into it with the Snipe Hunter, but that does use up the Snipe Hunter. If they want to clear the Legendary Jiu-Jitsu Master, they still have to pitch a card from hand. So they're still losing a fair amount of cards here to do this, and I feel like we've got the advantage in the long run here. But they're just going to do that. So they pitched a Rhynos there to pop that. Glad to see the Rhynos gone because they can be a bit annoying for us here. We draw into Mirror Force, which was pretty decent. Jinzo will be pretty decent when we get to stick, but we don't really have the tools to do that yet. So we're just going to set a Mirror Force here, pass back to them. I didn't want to set Crush card until I have a Dark Monster to pair with it. But maybe if I had set the Crush card, then they wouldn't have just blind MST'd our Mirror Force. But unfortunately, we will lose that. Luckily, Mirror Force isn't really the best against their deck because they can just Rhynos bounce something back. So, that's probably fine. But they set 1. We're just going to set a TT and a Crush card pass back to them. I think in hindsight, I probably could have had the read that the set was Morphing Jar. Even that pretty much everything else, they probably would have just summoned out and attacked in with. So I probably should have just set 4 here and passed back to them. But unfortunately, I did not have that read. And it is Morphing Jar. So we're going to lose our BrainCon and our D-Draw. We would have lost Jinzo either way. But we would have at least had these 2 very powerful spells online if that had not happened. But they're going to go for Mobius, pop 2 of our back row anyways. So, we might have lost them anyways. We still do have TT here to blow up the Mobius. And they're going to pass back to us. Luckily, we do have this Heavy Storm, so we're able to use that on our following turn. They're going to spin back this Spy with the Dust Shoot there. And then we're going to go for Heavy Storm here to blow up the entire board. And that's going to be pretty good because that Accumulated Fortune will not be able to trigger there. They don't have the chainables to actually make that work. Then we can just summon out a Sangan here, attack in for 1,000. I feel like this is a pretty good thing to sit on because if they clear the Sangan, we can search out something else, turn that online. The downside is if they've got another Dim Fizz and they summon out something to beat over the Sangame, that's going to be unfortunate for us. But they do need that other Dim Fizz to do that with. So they're going to attack in with the Breaker here, dealing us 900. We'll get a search here. And we ultimately decide to search at a Gravekeeper's Spy just to wall up against that Breaker there. We draw Stratos, which is also pretty good, but we don't necessarily want to commit that into a Breaker that it can't clear. So we're just going to set the Spy and pass back to them. They try attacking into the Spy. We just bring out another Spy here. And then we're just going to pass, or they're going to pass back to us. We try to do a Mobius here, so we could go for Mobius instead of Ryza. I did bring in some Mobiuses because I feel like it's relatively good against the deck, although it can be a bit awkward hitting that chainable back row, but it still might be worth it. And so instead of going for the Mobius, we go for the Demock instead. This might have been a mistake on my part because it plays into pulling. So if they've got pulling the rug, then they can shut off the Demock, and we can't get back that Heavy Storm. But if they don't have a pulling the rug, which they do not, then we can get back a Heavy Storm here and blow up the back row. But instead of going for that, we go for D-Draw instead to set up our Destiny Hero Malicious here. So I'm not sure if this was the right play or not. I think Heavy might have been a little bit better. But I don't hate this play because Mally's sort of clogging up our hand there. So we draw into pre-mat as well. We don't really have anything that we want to pre-mat here right now, although we could potentially pre-mat back Cyber Dragon and then attack over the Breaker. But I'm not at risk of dying yet, so I feel like we're honestly fine just passing back and seeing what they do. They're going to set one, attack in for 19 and 1,000 here, dropping us down a fair bit to be sure. But again, I feel like we're still in a fine spot. We've got pre-mat to do stuff with next turn. Oh, we draw into the other Mally. Oh, that just breaks your heart. Part of the reason why I'd gone for D-Draw is because I wanted to set up the Mally for the following turn when we go for Mobius and pop the back row, right? So, you know, now that we draw the other Mally, that plan is a bit dead in the water. And now we're in a much, much worse spot. It's just so rough. We go for pre-mat here, target the Sangam because we can still tribute it for like a Mobius or something to blow up them in the back row. We will indeed do that. Blowing up the 2 old back row. Hoping that they didn't double set Bottomless. And it looks like they've gotten offerings here to blow up the Mobius, but they will not be getting a draw next turn. So we're not dead on the next turn for sure. We hit a Shrink and a Saku, so I'm very glad I hit those because those are a bit more annoying. And unlike offerings, it can't be chained to what we were doing there. We'll also search at a Spirit Reaper here just to wall up on some of the following turns. Because we can't rely on our Mally to get us tribute fodder, we kind of got to get creative in other ways. They're going to attack in for 29, dropping us down to 500 life points, which is not a good spot to be. And we are just going to set this Reaper here and pass back to them. We don't want to set an MST into that Breaker that still is primed. So they're going to set 1 and pass back to us, not attacking into our set. We are fine with that. We're going to go for MST on the back row, hit a Pulling the Rug. Glad to see that gone now. And then I'm going to tribute the Reaper to spin back that Sangan and attack over the Breaker. And situations like this are where the Perfect Circle deck shines because our opponent has no resources except for the card that we know about that they're drawing into here. And they're going to set that card, pass back to us. Marshmallow didn't really do anything for us here, but we can search out a Disc Commander with this Stratos and then get in for some big damage. Trying to set up for a lethal shot next turn. Yes, they do get a search with the Sangan, but I'm not really sure what they can search here that is going to, help them out too much here. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. No back row. Yeah, it seems like they bricked on a Monarch here. And that's going to be very good for us because we know exactly what that set is, or at least we have some intuition as to what it might be. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to go for attacking in with the Stratos for lethal. I don't necessarily want to commit like a Trooper into it just in case it's something crazy or something, but I probably should have just summoned out Trooper and just gotten in. I don't really think there's anything that could punish us too much here besides like Mystic Tomato into some other things in their deck, but I don't think their deck is playing that. So I think I probably should have just summoned out the Trooper and gone for that in case it was something crazy. But I had the heavy read that was just Warrior Lady, and so we don't really need to do that. We can just attack in for lethal. So that is going to be the end of this game. Again, I misplayed like heck in some of these games here. Hopefully I was able to catch some of the major ones. But again, like the power of this deck is that even if you misplay a fair bit, you can still win the game, right? And in the hands of actually great players who can play this deck to peak efficiency, it is incredibly strong because it just locks down what your opponent can do, and it can get them into really awkward game states from pretty low resource situations themselves. So I think this deck is very, very good. I think it might be the best deck in the format for sure. I could definitely see that. But, you know, there are some other powerful decks in the format too, and we will be diving into more of them as I continue my coverage here. But I do think that, like, just in terms of the deck that has the best chance of winning events in the future, I do think that Perfect Circle Monarch is the one to beat. But let me know what you think about the deck down in the comments below. Do you think that this deck's a bit overrated, or do you think that it is actually better than I'm making it out to be in the Tier 0 format? I always like to discuss things with you, so let me know down in the comments below. Also, if you like this sort of content, subscribe to the channel, leave a like down below, do all that good YouTube algorithm stuff. It really does help grow the community, and that lets us have bigger events. And speaking of events, if you want to play in the zombie format tournament that we're holding this month, head over to the YGO from Zero Discord server, linked in the description down below. It's also a great place to get games in any of the other formats that are featured on the channel, so head on over there if you're interested. And lastly, big shout out as always to my patrons, Rinthwin, Pork Chop Coon, Bread Knocker, Tyler Compton, GeoMyFest, Dump Truck, and Scout Zero. It means a lot that you all support me this way and encourage me to make more videos like this one in the future. But that's going to do it for me. I hope you enjoyed as always, and until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero. I'm signing off. Peace.